Hello and thanks for stopping by. This is Attack of the Mutant Camels for the Commodore 64, published by Lamasoft in 1983. This is a side-scrolling shooter that's basically a clone of the Empire Strikes Back game for the Atari 2600. I saw some descriptions online that state the games are, quote, similar, but the word similar doesn't feel quite right to me. They're much closer than that. I think clone describes it just fine. There are differences, certainly, but if you played one and then popped in the other, you'd feel like you're playing the exact same game. With that being said, the game has some improvements over the 2600 game. From the get-go, the graphics are a little different, but the scale seems roughly the same. Your ship actually has a little bit of detail in there, and the camels, they're about the same size as the walkers in the 2600. The goal here is that aliens are attacking, and basically they mutated a bunch of camels for some reason, and they sent them on a march. Apparently, these camels are gigantic, and you pilot a spaceship, and your job is to try to stop them. They arrive in waves, and you need to race across the screen to first reach their position. They're at a constant march, and if you don't stop them, they're just going to overrun your position. Their goal is to walk to the end of the map on the right. That's where your ship starts. So, race over to encounter them, and you really should focus on the one in the lead. That is your most pressing problem. I suppose you could race to the one in the back, but it's not going to help out. The one in the front is the one that's going to cross the finish line first, so you really should focus on him. You have standard shots, and you can hold the trigger down in this game to fire. At the same time, the mutant camels will be shooting at you. You can take a few hits, but it's better to not get hit at all. Every couple of shots a camel takes, they will shoot a special shot that does more damage. You can tell the differences because it makes a different sound. You'll understand it when you see it. Just keep dodging. This was a new game to me on the Commodore 64, and I was a little confused at the start. I played the 2600 game, I was very familiar with it, but here, it was a little different. It wasn't quite a one-to-one transition in terms of gameplay. Here, when you approach a camel, you need to be within a specific range to actually do damage. If you're too far, if you try to stay to the edge of the screen and just shoot at a distance, your shots will ricochet off and not do any damage. You'll see them actually pass through the camel. So you have to pay attention to make sure your shots are actually hitting. If they're not, you need to get closer. That's the best place to be, is up close, but the problem is when you get too close, that makes dodging really hard. You can shoot from both the front and the back. Camels are vulnerable on both sides, but you still have to get close. And I usually find that going through a mix of both is what it's going to take. Start in the front, and if the camel gets too close, you switch to shooting from behind, and you try to finish him off that way if you can. You'll get into a rhythm, probably. As you shoot the camels and they take damage, they're going to shift colors. This is useful. From what I can tell, they shift to gray twice, and it's the second time that they shift is the one you're hoping for, because usually that means you're about to finish them off. After you destroy the camel in the lead, you need to quickly shift to the next one in the row. There's an entire wave, you got to get them all, obviously. If you're focused enough to eliminate the entire column, you're going to really need to pay attention to what happens next. You can see this in my footage. After you beat the last camel in the row, your ship is supposed to be hopping to hyperwarp to advance to the next sector. The immediate problem here is that switching to hyperwarp happens really fast. The screen is going to flash all these colors, and that indicates your success, and usually you finished a level, this is where you sort of relax a little bit. However, here, suddenly, just as this is starting, rockets are going to be launched to intercept you. They're going to appear out of nowhere, so you immediately have to start worrying about dodging. In the footage of the video, you can see me getting wiped out by these rockets as soon as I defeated the last camel. There are plenty of flashy colors for explosions here, in the standard Commodore 64 style, and the challenge is there, even if it's a bit repetitive over time. To me, it's just like Empire Strikes Back in terms of basic design, although the camels seem to have much better aim, and I find myself getting wiped out much more frequently here. This feels like a faster game. To be clear, I like both games. This one's just fine. It's a little weirder, but I like it. This game was also released for the Atari 8-bit family, and there was, apparently, a completely different game released under the exact same name. So if you go searching for this game, you might actually find the other game. I caught a view of that in another video. I guess the only thing they really share is the name, but it's the same developer, so I don't know what's going on with that. The developer here was part of some other notable games from the 80s, like Grid Runner and Tempest. I'm sure I'll get to those eventually. Although I do see this as a direct clone to an Atari game that I played a lot, this is a decent enough game by itself, and it's something I'd come back to. I'm glad it's on the carousel of my C64, and certainly this one has some challenge to it. It's just something I probably wouldn't sit down for hours to play, but I give it a good 20 minutes or so. Well, that's all I have for the Attack of the Mutant Camels for the Commodore 64. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.